Imagine a country in the heart of the Caucasus Mountains. A small country with a big history, its name, Armenia. In 301 AD, when the world was still in the grip of paganism and great empires had yet to embrace the religion of heaven, Armenia stood tall, making history as the first country in the world to officially embrace Christianity. Long before the Roman Empire made Christianity its state religion, Armenia had already embraced the teachings of Jesus Christ. But history never stands still. Times change, civilizations grow, and at some point in alternate history, a major change occurs. What if, after more than 1,000 years of being a bastion of Christianity, the entire Armenian people embraced Islam? The 1500s. The world is in turmoil. The Ottomans rule in the west, the Safavids in the east. Armenia is caught in the middle of the fires of two great Muslim empires. At first it was just politics. Then culture comes in. Arabic and Persian are taught in schools. Religious leaders begin to hold interfaith discussions. Sufis and clerics come from Tabriz, Baghdad, and Istanbul. Slowly, one by one, the village is changed. First for economic reasons, then for protection, then for faith. And at some point in the 17th century, churches became mosques. Crosses were replaced by crescents. Bibles were replaced by Qurans. Armenia, the world's oldest Christian country, is now a devout Muslim country. Has its culture disappeared? The art of stone carving Khachkars has survived, now inscribed with holy verses. Armenian folk songs are still sung, but their lyrics praise God. Armenian is still spoken, but prayers are now recited in the name of Allah. In school, children memorize the Al-Fatiha and continue to learn about their nation's history. An Armenian who embraces Islam is still an Armenian, says one historian. Only its soul has transformed. From cross to prayer mat, from baptism to ablution. But its love for its land, its culture, its past, it remains. The world was shocked. The Vatican was devastated. Byzantium had collapsed. Now mighty Armenia was transformed. But the Muslim world welcomed Armenia, a new brother in faith. And there we see a profound reality. Religions may change, but identities do not always disappear. Not everyone accepted this change easily. In the corners of mountain villages, old Christian priests wept silently. They watched as the churches their ancestors built became new places of prostration. Some chose to leave their homeland, sailed to Constantinople, to Rome, to Russia. They took with them copies of the ancient Bible and memories of the cross that once stood in the center of the village square. But some stayed, not out of fear, but out of love. Love for the land, love for the people, love for God, in a different form. My grandmother was a Christian, says an old cleric in Yerevan, but she always said, true faith is love. Whether you call it Jesus or Isa, God is one. Armenia developed into a center of Caucasian Islamic culture. Large madrasas were established in Gyumri and Yerevan. Armenian Muslim writers and poets emerged, writing poetry in Armenian, Arabic, and Persian. A new spiritual capital grew up around Lake Sevan. It was there that the largest mosque in the Caucasus was built, whose architecture combines the design of ancient Christian Khachkars with Islamic calligraphy. The world experienced an industrial revolution. Colonialism, nationalism, and modernity shook civilization. Armenia is now a bridge between the Islamic world and the West. Armenia's Muslim diplomats sit at the European negotiating table. They speak 5 languages, quote Al-Ghazali and Shakespeare in one sentence. They are respected because they are the mirror of two worlds. This country is living proof that identities can grow without losing their roots, that faith can change without killing culture. In universities, Armenian scholars study 2 great legacies, the Bible and the Quran, the cross and the crescent, not as symbols of conflict, but as 2 sides of their history. That what makes a nation great is not whether it is Christian or Muslim. Today, in that alternative Armenia, the call to prayer still echoes from the minarets of mosques that used to be church bell towers. Children still dance folk dances, singing the songs of their ancestors, now with verses praising God. The year is 2025. Armenia still stands. The cities have changed, but Mount Ararat stands still, gazing upon the nation that was and is. He was 12 years old. His mother was a primary school teacher. His father was an architect who had just finished restoring an old mosque that had once been an ancient church. In their study, there were two frames. One contained calligraphy that read, "Ikra Bismi Rabbika." The other, a copy of an old Khachkar, a 9th century Armenian stone cross. His mother smiled, but in her heart, there was a strange quiver. Not sadness, not pride, but a sense of urgency, that they were now a bridge between two eras. One day, Harut asked, "Mom, why is there a picture of a cross in our house? Aren't we Muslims?" His mother paused. Then he answered quietly, "Because it's part of who we are, son. We used to be Christians, then we became Muslims. But what never changes, we are always Armenian." But it was about how a nation learns to make peace with its history, without forgetting, without denying, without blaming. Armenia's young generation is now growing up as Muslims, yet still studying Saint Gregory, reading ancient church poetry, and cherishing the stories of the early Armenian Christian martyrs. And the world is learning that perhaps in this small country that was once the world's first Christian nation, there is a great lesson for all of humanity. The lesson that identity is not a wall, but a window. That faith can change, but love for one's homeland and heritage need not fade away. At school, Harut learns to read the Quran and also learns about the ancient Armenian alphabet. In his small library, there are old leather-bound Qurans and a Bible in Grabar, both inherited from his grandmother, who was a nun before converting to Islam. When the harvest festival arrives, families gather in the town square. Mothers serve lavish and dolma, while children dance the kochari to the accompaniment of zurna and dof. The imam of the mosque and the caretaker of the old church stand side by side, welcoming people who have come from the mountain villages. Among the ruins of history and buildings that have come back to life with new meaning, a nation is slowly learning the most difficult thing: to forgive without forgetting, to change without losing its roots, to unite without homogenizing. And 12-year-old Harut grew up with two legacies that did not negate each other, but reinforced each other. Because in this new Armenia, being Muslim did not mean abandoning who you were, and being Armenian no longer had to mean choosing one part of your history and discarding the other. They had learned to be whole, not by covering up wounds, but by making them part of the mosaic of the nation's soul. And from the foot of Mount Ararat, new hope continued to flow into the world. Hope that a divided world might yet be united, not by sameness, but by appreciation for difference. Harut stood in front of the class one day, reading his assignment, a poem he had written himself. His teachers were silent. Some bowed their heads, their eyes moist. Some were born into Christian families, some into Muslim families, and some no longer identified with either, but all felt part of the verse. Outside the school, new buildings stood side by side with ancient ruins. A mosque with Ottoman-style arches sat next to an Armenian church with its distinctive cone roof. The call to prayer echoed through the air, but the small toll of the bells that were still rung on special occasions. In honor, not in resurrection. Armenia's new government created an impartial history curriculum. The National Museum showcases both the stories of Christian martyrs and the early spreaders of Islam in the region. In one room, an old icon of Jesus. In another, a torn 16th century prayer rug. In the middle, an inscription reads, "Here is where wounds and love learn to coexist." And Harut, along with his generation, wrote a new chapter in their nation's long book. Not a perfect chapter, but an honest one. And in that honesty, hope was born. That a nation once burned by war and division could now be a beacon for a world seeking a way out of the endless cycle of revenge. Because in this small land between mountains and time, one people had learned that being one did not mean being the same, but understanding each other.